Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing well today. I wanted to do this brief video on here for those of you who know me or just met me, that I had a couple of people DM me about a comment I made on a Twitter feed. I'm not going to say who, but asking me, I look so happy and always positive on my page, and how could I possibly have PTSD or anxiety? So that's why I'm on here doing this. I've had PTSD probably almost all my life, and I didn't realize I had it until probably about, 4 years ago. Sorry, I have a piece of freaking dust. It's windy a little bit here today. And I came to sit in the car, and yeah, my hair blew all over the place. Anyways, I have PTSD from childhood traumatic experiences, both physically and sexually and mentally. And so I have a lot of stuff from my past, abandonment issues and what I just listed. So I was diagnosed with PTSD, or realized I had PTSD triggers probably about 3 years ago, maybe 4. So yeah. So this face that you see in this positive outlook are the way I choose to live my life instead of choosing to be a victim. I'm a survivor, and I've been a survivor for the last 2 years. Before that, I would wallow in it and hide it behind closed doors so people wouldn't know that I was suffering within myself. So, triggers. Triggers are also something that PTSD people have, and if you don't have PTSD or triggers, then you're not going to understand someone's triggers, because someone's triggers to you may seem like something you deal with every single day of your life that don't bother you. However, triggers for a PTSD person are the end of the world at the moment of the trigger. We're engulfed in that trigger. We are in the moment of the trigger, and so it's very hard to see the light outside of the trigger, okay? And what I mean by trigger is trigger emotions, trigger words, things that happen around you that trigger it, that you weren't expecting, and it happens so fast that once you're in the trigger, once you're in that moment, it's really hard unless you have the right tools to get out of that trigger. I've talked about it a lot on my YouTube channel, and if you haven't visited my YouTube channel, I suggested that to a few people that messaged me about my PTSD. Not just veterans or people who've been in the service have PTSD. People like myself from childhood trauma have PTSD. But I think I did 1, maybe 2 videos on my YouTube channel. Actually, I think one of the videos was me in a PTSD trigger moment, which was very hard for me to upload on YouTube because it shows the rawness of me going through that. Because I don't like showing people my weaknesses. However, if it helps one person out there to deal with not feeling alone with their triggers, then that's why I put it up there. My triggers are from weather anxiety, which is an abandonment issue that I have, as well as some things from my mother when I was growing up. And so I've dealt with that in such a way now that I am doing very well, because I eat clean pretty much for the most part. No gluten or soy pretty much. And gluten gets in food everywhere, so it can't be 100%. But gluten and soy are 2 of the foods that I have eliminated from my food plan, as well as I do a lot of meditation for my anxiety. And I also do what I call pivoting. So what I do is, when I start to feel a trigger coming on, I try to pivot my thought process to think of other things in my life that are positive, so that I don't wallow and sit in that trigger. And that's not easy to do once you start learning it, because let's just face it, PTSD triggers are not logical, right? So I could say to someone, I live in Louisiana, my trigger is flooding, right? So when we start to get a hurricane or a storm, my trigger gets hit, right? My trigger. And people are like, well, then why do you live there? I didn't always have this trigger. I didn't get this trigger until about 5 years ago. And there's a reason for it that I don't really want to talk about on here, but there's a reason for it. I'm much better than I was back then. But the trigger comes from abandonment. Because what happened was I was going through a hurricane and I was abandoned, left. And so that's a trigger for me. And so that went back to my childhood of an issue that I had as a child where I was abandoned in a similar situation. So what happened was, in the moment here, in this trigger 5 years ago, it triggered past traumatic experiences from a childhood. That's how PTSD triggers work. You don't realize you have a trigger until it triggers, and then you realize, why does this bother me now if it never did before? But it usually goes back to something that either one, you're as a child, we have that chemical in our brain, right, where it erases it so you don't remember. So then as an adult, when you're working through things like I've been for the last 4 or 5 years, things come up that I didn't remember because I chose as a child chemically, because it was so hard to deal with, to push it down and hide it. So the last 3 years have been me digging through childhood trauma and accepting the truth and working through it, which is extremely hard to do because it's like an old scar on your body where you reopen the wound, right? And you're working through that again, through the pain, the suffering, the infection, all that. So that's what I've had to do for the last 3 years, 4 years. And so whenever anybody posts on here or anywhere else about having PTSD and anxiety, I always make it a personal choice to comment or send them a message and let them know that if they need an ear or need somebody to listen to them, I'm here. Because most people, not all, and I'm not judging everybody, but majority of people who don't understand it say all the wrong things. And so telling someone with PTSD or a trigger or anxiety, you have so much to live for and so much to be happy about. I don't know why you're so, anxious or upset. Truly, those people don't understand when you go through a trigger or when you're going through anxiety, obviously. So the only one that's responsible for changing your thought pattern or your process is yourself. And the only thing that has helped me tremendously is having a very strong personality where I don't want to be the victim anymore, and also with loving myself to the point where I don't want to be one of those people like I grew up with, where they had drug and alcohol problems, or were promiscuous, or were abusive, or alcoholics, or whatever the case may be. I refuse to be that. So I had no other choice but to pick up my britches and keep pushing along. So here I am doing this video and opening up my rawness in front of you all, so that one person out there on Twitter world or YouTube or whoever watches this knows that you're not alone, and that there are people out there that are watching and see what you post and know that you're suffering and you're not suffering alone. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I love you guys, and I hope you all have a great Friday. Bye!